All right, let's break down the offense now. And of course, Connor Weigman, I thought he was pretty impressive despite a rough game down in Miami against the Canes early last season. A lot of pressure put on him to throw the ball something like 50 plus times. The offensive line not doing the job, but he hung in there and kept Texas A&M in the game. Unfortunately, we got to see him very little after that, of course, with the season-ending injury, but 69% completion percentage, and really no quarterback battle here, correct, as long as Connor Weigman is upright and healthy.
Pretty much. Yeah, Elko said he's the number one guy going into the spring. Still recovering a little bit from that ankle injury that he sustained in the Auburn game. Just by nature of the injury, it's going to take a little bit for him to be back at full speed. But as far as I can tell from the reporting, it's mainly going to limit his running. So he'll be able to stand in there and throw and all that sort of thing. But it will be really interesting to see who stacks up behind him. You got Jalen Henderson and Marcel Reed, both of which saw time after all the injuries that A&M had at quarterback last year. And both were impressive. Henderson was the third string guy and Reed was the fourth string guy. And Henderson had to come in the Mississippi State game, and that was, funnily enough, it was Jimbo's last game, but it was a game the Aggies won 51-10. And that had a lot to do with how impressive Henderson was running the offense. And he looked promising the first half against LSU until the whole team ran out of gas, especially the defense trying to contain Jaden Daniels and, their amazing receiving core. And then Henderson gets hurt in the first play of the bowl game. And then you have this true freshman come in, Marcel Reed. And once I saw Henderson go down, I basically threw up my hands. I thought that was it for the game. And obviously the Aggies didn't end up winning, but Reed looked great. He could run, he could throw on the run. So it definitely feels like Reed has a higher ceiling. Whether he can get to that and establish himself above Henderson in camp, hopefully this is all theoretical too. Hopefully Weigman is able to play healthy the whole season and we don't have to see these guys take meaningful snaps. But with the way things have gone at quarterback in the last couple of years, I think a lot of Aggie fans feel like just a sort of grim feeling that it might become relevant at some point during the season.
Yeah, 361 yards off the bench, coming off the cold bench, and having to relieve Henderson rather quickly in that game is pretty impressive. Mm-hmm. Back to Weigman, is it just a matter of, as long as he's healthy, just a matter of this guy just needs reps to get better? Or are there particular aspects of his game that people are looking to see him decidedly improve on?
I think the thing that he had the toughest time with last year was, and I suppose you could also chalk this up to just the way Jimbo's offense works, because the offensive line and the rest of the offense, from what I've read about it, are basically speaking two different languages. So it can be very hard to pull this off. Identifying blitzers and making pre-snap reads as far as where the pressure is coming from. That was the biggest issue in the Miami game. He still was making some insane throws in that game. If you just go back and watch the tape, he's running for his life and he's just putting it on a dot to the receiver. It's really impressive stuff. But, if he had identified the pressure right, it would have been a little unnecessary. So maybe that's just a function of Jimbo's offense. Maybe that is Weigman needs to improve seeing the field pre-snap. But that was definitely the biggest thing that jumped out last season. Honestly, just all the physical ability is there. It never seemed like he was making a wrong read or a bad read or throwing into traffic. When he was throwing on the run, like I say, more often than not, it would be really accurate. His deep ball's great. I'm really high on him coming into the season. So if he can get that piece of things cleaned up, and maybe in Colin Klein's offense, that just automatically will happen for him. But if he can get that piece of things cleaned up, I'm really excited to see what he'll do this season.
We've got Graham Harmon here from Gig'em Gazette breaking down Texas A&M football. The Aggies just hit the practice field just a few days ago to get started. You can join Graham right there at Gig'em Gazette as we run through the offense. Running backs, Amari Daniels, and of course, Le'Veon Moss basically split carries, both totaled about 500 yards rushing, about 5 yards per carry. Is there one guy in particular that you like better, or do they complement each other pretty well in regards to their skill sets?
I prefer Moss. He's more of an all around back, and the game just felt the running game just felt easier when he was in. Daniels had flashes of brilliance. He had some huge like breakout carries, but he just doesn't. He's not as physically talented as Moss is to my eyes. But I don't want to forget about Reuben Owens either. You know that he was a true freshman last year. He can fly when he gets in the open field. The problem was running through contact last year. Being in Tommy Moffitt's strength and conditioning program, I think helped him build up a little bit of bulk, and he has as high a ceiling as anybody, honestly, in the conference. He's that physically talented. It's just and he's great receiving skills too out of the backfield. So don't want to forget about him. Moss, I think. I mean, I'd be surprised if he's not the guy who trots out there with the first team offense against Notre Dame, though. So he's the one I would take to be the starter. And E.J. Smith, transfer they brought in from Stanford, sort of a third down back. He's almost as good of a receiver as he is a running back. He'll be kind of a situational guy, but that's basically the room at this point.
Folks, we appreciate you stopping by here at the Voice of College Football. We got Graham Harmon here from Gig'em Gazette. Of course, join him there. And please like the video and subscribe here at the Voice of College Football, covering the SEC top to bottom here on the channel you're most likely watching. All right. Wide receivers. Of course, it's a disappointment to see a guy like Evan Stewart take off for Oregon. Ainias Smith moves on to the NFL. What does the position look like at this point?
Well, like I said with Owens, the potential is really high. The top line talent is great. The depth is a big issue. They brought in, technically 3 guys. One was a preferred walk-on from the transfer portal. Jabre Barber from Troy, Cyrus Allen from Louisiana Tech, and then Wesley Watson from Kansas State. All came in, and Barber and Allen, I think both kind of fit that slot Ainias Smith role, kind of explosive in the open field. And that's a slot that, pun not intended, but that A&M doesn't really have someone in with Ainias leaving. He was such a leader, and you need a big play, he'll go out and make it. Ainias was. And so it definitely hurts to see him leave. But Jade Walker, the transfer from Grand Valley State, really emerged at the end of last season. Moose Muhammad, if he can be consistent, could be one of the best receivers in the nation. I mean, he makes highlight catches basically every time he gets more than 10 snaps in a game. Noah Thomas, another name to watch. I think 3 touchdowns in the first game, but then he got injured and didn't play very much the rest of the year, or wasn't able to go at 100% really. Huge red zone weapon at 6'6". Micah Tease, going to be I don't think he kept his red shirt. He'll be a sophomore. He's another kind of explosive in the open field guy. Flipped from Arkansas on signing day last year, and he's exciting with his potential, but he's just not proven. So you got 4 of those guys. You got 3 freshman receivers coming in, and then 3 from the portal. A lot that needs to be proven at that position, though.
And certainly, Graham, between Muhammad, Thomas, and Walker, we're talking about 3 guys that totaled, let's do the math, 81 catches and 9 touchdowns. So they have played. They've been productive receivers, not star receivers, but with Stewart and Smith out of the way, there's certainly opportunity for more targets and for these guys to post bigger numbers, and with more consistent quarterback play, hopefully with Weigman sticking around for the entire season.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And Stewart played in only one of the last 4 games. I think he played against Prairie View, but he missed Mississippi State, LSU, and he was already transferred by the bowl game. And Walker was the guy who stepped up. In his absence, Walker made a lot of plays, especially in the bowl game, and just a mind-boggling catch I think of specifically against LSU, where he ran downfield and Henderson had to sling it to him. Basically, it felt like he was falling out of bounds, and he caught it. And he, by all accounts, great locker room guy, really hard worker, a guy that a lot of A&M fans are ready to see have a huge season. So he's one that was not very heralded coming in from Grand Valley State, but I think a lot of Aggie fans were really pleased with the way he looked near the end of the year last year.
And then Graham at tight end. Of course, you got Donovan Green. He was supposed to be the starter, I believe, last year, went down with the ACL. And you bring in 2 transfers with Garrett Miller and Trey Watson coming in from Purdue and Fresno State, and they posted pretty decent seasons with 38 and 30 catches.
Yeah, absolutely. The getting Donovan back is huge. He had a great freshman season. Obviously, lose Jake Johnson there, follows his brother Max to North Carolina. Donovan, even though Jake was ranked higher, and he was injured their true freshman year, and then Donovan was injured last year. And I expected Jake to maybe break out a little more than he did. And maybe some of that has to do with the inconsistency at quarterback. But we're all excited to see Green back. I think he tore his ACL in like one of the last scrimmages before the season started. So that was a tough blow, but he's going to be great. A guy that a lot of A&M fans are excited about is Theo Millen Orstrom from Sweden. He's like 6'7" and can run a 4.5 40. He's like athletic freak, just needs to, reps to play the game and all that sort of thing. So this will be his 3rd year at the collegiate level. If they can unlock him, there's a lot of potential there. But Miller and Watson, Watson was a late flip because he had committed to DeBoer at Washington before DeBoer left to go to Alabama. And so A&M was able to get him in the boat. He and Miller, I definitely think they'll be crucial because Klein uses so many kind of that H-back, uses tight ends a lot in his offense. He's so multiple, so he uses them all over all different kinds of formations. So having multiple receiving options at the position, I think, the importance of that can't really be understated.
Folks, keep it locked in here at the Voice of College Football. Just here in the past week or so, we've taken a spring tour around Alabama, LSU, now Texas A&M. We've got Auburn and others on the way, Arkansas as well. Got Graham Harmon here, and you can catch him on Gig'em Gazette. Okay, the offensive line. Now, maybe this is just a stereotype for me, but with A&M having the issues that they've had over the course of Jimbo's tenure, and then once it became apparent that they weren't going to meet expectations and that he would really need to turn things around, my thought was always, okay, well, they can't find a quarterback, or Jimbo's screwing up the quarterback with too complicated of an offense or an outdated offense or something. But never is the problem, not never, but typically in the trenches, especially in the defensive side and that front 7 on defense, they've recruited just so well, and they've played pretty well on that side. And then the same thing with the offensive line. But I do see that pretty much everybody's coming back from that side of the football. And how do you feel about the offensive line performance last year and how it projects this season?
Well, maybe a dose of spring Kool-Aid, but I think everyone's hoping that the offensive line struggles from the last 2 years mostly have to do with departed coach Steve Adazio. Things really took a nosedive in 2022 along the offensive front, and that coincided with his arrival after the departure of Josh Henson, who's obviously at Southern Cal now. And I was a proponent of keeping Adazio around for 2023 just because I felt like continuity at that. We back? Can you hear me?
Okay, there we go. Yeah, you froze up right about the point that. Can you hear me? You got me as well? Hey, Graham? You got me
Yes,
now?
yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think it was on your end, I believe. So
Okay.
um, you had just said that you were a proponent to keep Adazio around because of the continuity, and that's so just pick it up
Okay.
wherever I'll be able to.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. He The continuity didn't help because 2023 was not quite as bad as 2022, was still pretty bad. Just miscommunications, and it was all mental too. If you want to go back and watch the tape, I mean, you got guys like looking this way, and you got a blitzer coming right here, and they don't even like look over to try to pick him up. It was mind-boggling some of the things we were seeing, and it really did feel evident at one point that it came down to coaching. So Aggie fans, I think, are really hopeful that a change there will help. We know we have a lot of talent there. Bryce Foster, Reuben Fothery had sensational freshman seasons at center and tackle, and they really regressed for the last 2 years. Cam Dewberry, very skilled. Mark Naboo, very skilled. Chase Basantis played his whole freshman season at tackle, more natural guard though, so I think they'll likely move him inside. Um, Fothery was injured a lot of last season, so I think they'll have him play along the outside there. Trey Zune actually had at left tackle a pretty good year last year. Now his freshman year, apparently he was playing with a bad injury the whole year, so maybe that's just seeing him injured the first year and then seeing him at full strength the next year. But it's there's a lot of hope, but when is there not a lot of hope in spring, right? Um, but that is a unit that needs to play up to their potential if A&M is able to achieve what we all want them to, right? This year, 9, even 10 wins. You can't do that with such a porous offensive line like we have been seeing the last 2 years. So that needs to be shored up. And I think Elko knows that. I think Coach Cushing knows that. And I think that is going to be a point of emphasis in the spring.
This Jimbo Fisher Bobby Petrino experiment only lasted one season, of course. And now you mentioned Colin Klein coming in from Kansas State. Based on reports, based on what he has had to say, what Mike Elko has had to say, do you expect any radical differences to the offense?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to visually look a lot different. He has such an interesting blend of so many different things. I mean, like 1980s wing tee and like 2010 spread, like from one snap to the next. He is so multiple in the things that he calls, but shockingly, it somehow seems much less complicated for the players than Jimbo's offense was, which looked the same the whole time. Um, and so he's so highly thought of in the coaching community from all reports, everything I can tell, for a reason. He is just a tough guy to prepare for. One of the things I think encapsulates this best, Mark, is when Kansas State played Texas last year, and Kansas State was a power running team. Like they predicated a lot of their game on that. But Texas has Byron Murphy, Devondre Sweat. You are not going to be able to run up the middle on them, especially with Kansas State's talent, right? And Klein didn't just run his head into a brick wall over and over. He's like, okay, I'm going to call this game differently. And Kansas State ends up losing, right? But they put up a huge passing performance by a quarterback who's just kind of a guy against a pretty decent Texas defensive backfield because Klein is that adaptable and that multiple in the way he can call his offense. If that was Jimbo Fisher calling that, you get 3 and outs all day because he won't stop calling power left, power right, ISO middle, whatever. So it's definitely, I think, going to visually be very different.
With Texas A&M type resources, facilities, recruiting, all of it, and with what Mike Elko showed us in a brief time there at Duke, which I think is, again, I used the term remarkable at the top, and I truly believe that, because if you look at what Duke football was when he got there, they had 1 win in the ACC in like 17 games prior to his arrival, and they stayed close to everyone his first season, went 9-4, didn't get blown out, came within a drive of making the ACC championship game, and then they lose Riley Leonard last year. Otherwise, they're leading at Florida State deep into the third quarter. Just to take that same roster and do what he did with it's pretty impressive. And now, of course, he's familiar with, although in the transfer portal era, not as familiar with as many players on this roster as he might have been otherwise, but still, he recruited a lot of these guys. So it seems like a great fit, and I thought it was the home run hire of the offseason.
Yeah, it definitely felt that way to A&M fans in light of the Mark Stoops thing that happened the day before. It certainly felt like a very welcome development, although there were fans, and I won't say whether I was included in this number, who had their head in the clouds with Dan Lanning or Kalen DeBoer or that sort of thing. But the more we've had him around, the more we kind of think about kind of all those things you were saying, the familiarity with the roster and the immediate impact that he had at Duke, really turning around, like getting so much out of those players. The more it has seemed like this could actually work like really quickly, especially when you look at the schedule A&M has this upcoming year. Their 4 biggest games are at home. Their toughest road trip is to Auburn at the end of the year. And, Hugh Freeze and Auburn, that's not going to be a cakewalk by any means, but, you get LSU, Texas, Notre Dame, and Missouri all at home. So with the performance he was able to get out of Duke talent and the amount of talent we know we have on campus in College Station, if he can maximize that potential in the same way, this could be a really scary team this year.
Graham, we appreciate you stopping by. We would encourage everyone to take a deeper dive with Graham on Gig'em Gazette. But again, thanks for the breakdown. Hopefully we can get you back here to talk some defense.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Let me know anytime.